This is Don from A Life's Journeys. If you've ever wondered what it's like to do a mileage run, then this video is for you. My mileage run from Toronto to Singapore, a 66-hour, 22,000 mile adventure, started with a ride on the Union Pearson Express, which is a train system that runs between Toronto Union Station in downtown Toronto and Pearson International Airport Terminal 1. It's about a 25-minute ride and costs about $8. The trains are very clean and have free Wi-Fi. It's a very efficient way to get from the city to the airport. My first segment was from Toronto to San Francisco on an Air Canada flight, so I had to check in at the Air Canada gates. It's a nice wide open area. There's a lot of self-service kiosks, so it went very quickly. After checking in and getting through security, then it was time to have a little bit of a bite. I started at the Air Canada Maple Leaf Lounge. It can be very sparse, but a few good food options. For something more substantive, I went to the Plaza Premium Lounge after walking the airport terminal for a bit. After my time in the lounge, it was time to get boarded for the flight to San Francisco. Again, it was a Boeing 787 from Air Canada. 787s, as usual, are nice and great air. It was about a 5.5 hour flight, very efficient and quite relaxing and enjoyable. It was a good way to get the journey started. I was able to get a little bit of sleep on it after a long work day. The entertainment system was good. Good selection of movies and television shows, and of course the now ubiquitous flight tracker system. Good to always, I find it at least, enjoyable to see where I am in the course of the journey and see what remains. After the 5.5 hours on the flight from Toronto to San Francisco, it was time to disembark. And since I had a couple of hours between flights, and I would next be boarding about a 17-hour flight from San Francisco to Singapore, I decided it was time to get up, walk around, stretch my legs, partly to get the blood flowing. Always a concern about DVTs or deep vein thrombosis when you're on these really long flights. So there's a couple of precautions to take. One is compression socks, because it really does help keep the blood flow when you're seated for a really long time on a plane. Two is, when you get a chance, get up and walk around, whether that's in the terminals or on the planes. And third, before I take the long flights, and about every 4 or 5 hours while on the flights, I tend to take a baby aspirin. Helps keep the blood a little bit more fluid and avoids any of the problems of blood clots. So finally got up to starting to board the flight to Singapore. Again, this is United Airlines direct flight, San Francisco to Singapore, on a 787. I was seated in the Economy Plus section of the aircraft. Probably not the ideal for a long trip like this, but gives a lot more leg room than if seated in regular economy. I was able to book these seats at the time of booking as a result of having platinum status in the United Airlines Mileage Plus program. It's quite a long journey, as the maps will show, but I passed the time with the meal service. Obviously gets a little bit of time passed, though the food was economy class food, and it has those natural limitations to it. Not always the best flavored, but it fills the hunger of the tummy. There was sort of a dinner when we boarded, followed by a mid-flight snack about 7 hours in, and then a pre-landing breakfast about 90 minutes out. I occupied the rest of the time by sleeping, watching a couple movies and a few television shows. I highly recommend a pair of noise canceling headphones just to help sleep a little bit better. My favorite is the Bose in-ear headphones, just because there's nothing bulky on the outside and it makes it easy to sleep. I was lucky to get a lot of sleep on the flight and was ready to disembark and get going when we arrived at Singapore at about 8 in the morning. Again, it had been a little over a 17-hour flight, so I started off with a long walk through the terminal. Lots of things to see in the terminal, and what I was really doing was just trying to stretch my legs a bit, get some exercise, again, avoiding any blood clot issues from long flights, and was heading over to find a lounge where I could get a shower. Uh, I was at work the full day before I left, and then a couple of really good flights, so I was feeling a little dirty. It was time to get cleaned up. So I headed up to the Ambassador Lounge, which is a decent lounge. The food was not amazing, but they had good showers and clean showers. And here you can see just the little shower room that they put you into. The good thing is it's clean, it's quick, it's a good way to get freshened up before heading into the city for the day. I'd had a good meal on the plane. I wasn't very hungry, so after my shower I had just a little bit to eat and check some messages before heading to Customs and Immigration and exiting the airport. Singapore has a great rapid transit system with a station right in the main terminals at Singapore Changi Airport. It was maybe about a 5-minute walk from the customs hall to get down to the train platform. The easiest thing to do is just buy one of their rapid transit cards. You load it up with money, and it's just a tap on, tap off kind of thing. The ride from the airport to downtown takes about 25 minutes and to 30 minutes roughly, depending on where you want to go. It is part of their general rapid transit system, but it's clean and, not surprisingly for Singapore, and very efficient. A note for obtaining the rapid transit cards: when you pick it up at the airport booth only takes cash, so make sure you stop at an ATM first and get some cash. It's easy to reload it later using a credit card, but that initial purchase and deposit does require cash payment. The line that goes out to the airport is a spur line, so you take about 3 station stops and then have to transfer to another line that will take you into the city. I guess the transfer between platforms is about a 3 or 4 minute walk, basically down an escalator, up an escalator, and onto another platform. And then you can board the main transit line that will take you into the city. I had about 14 hours between my arrival and my departure flight that would start my journey back home. I decided to spend the day taking hop-on, hop-off bus tours. I've been to Singapore several times before, but there's lots of the city that I still hadn't seen. Taking the hop-on, hop-off bus tour, and I did the ones with big bus tours, gave me a way to see parts of the city that I hadn't been to, or to see it from a perspective that I hadn't had before. They've got a great set of open-top buses, which are really nice on a sunny day. Not so good when it started to have a torrential downpour towards the end of the day as we get further on in the video. I think there's a short clip of just how heavy the rain was. But that said, there's 6 routes, and again, hits all the highlights, sees everything. It's a great way, I find, to get an overview of the city when combined with some walking. There's so much to see in and around Singapore, with great architecture, different neighborhoods, that were largely set up from uh, when Singapore was first laid out in a grid and first set up with communities of people with different ethnic backgrounds. There's a vibrant Little India, a Malay district, and a very active Chinatown, as well as colonial and modern architecture, and a lot of great things to see, even if you're just riding along on the bus. It has managed to really combine maintenance of the heritage with uh, becoming a very modern city in the way that it has spread out and developed. A lot of Singapore's history evolves from trade along the river, but of course, in more modern years, it's developed a lot of its new architecture and new central business districts and Marina Bay Sands, as we see here, on reclaimed land. Um, the area around Marina Bay Sands, which is a very impressive hotel and casino complex, is out on the south side of Marina Bay. Out behind it is a beautiful facility called Gardens by the Bay, which has a lot of different trees and various types of not agricultural, but trees, plants, great walking area. A lot of it's in sort of very large, almost greenhouse-like structures. It makes for a very nice way to spend a part of the day. Um, as we can see with the Helix Bridge, which is another one of the noteworthy features of Singapore. It's a walking bridge across the river. Uh, the Singapore Flyer is their observation wheel, a lot like the London Eye. Uh, a great thing to go up in. Gives a great view of Singapore and the surrounding areas. This fountain is interesting in that it's a downward fountain rather than upwards, and is said to be the largest of its kind in the world. It was really a different sort of sight, being a Westerner that's so used to all the water flowing up in the air on fountains, and so it was kind of an interesting thing to see. Um, but that's part of the experience. We're getting a closer look here at the Singapore Flyer, the observation wheel. Again, just a great way to get an overview of the city, um, the bay, and a lot of the surrounding islands and that sort of thing. I know some people have accused Singapore of being a bit of a sleepy city, and it is clean and orderly, and government make sure that's the case, and that you've got the restrictions on drugs and spitting and chewing gum and that all of those sorts of regulatory restrictions to keep things good. But I find it's a really neat city with some really good hotels, great dining scene, whether it's in their hawker stalls, which is really just street food brought indoors, to some really great high-end dining, and pretty much everything in between. And here you can see the late afternoon tropical rainfall, which ended up just being an absolute torrent of rain. So with all that rain, I decided to head indoors for a little bit and made my way to Marina Bay Sands and the great shopping mall that's there. The shops at Marina Bay Sands has a lot of great high-end stores. If you want to do some luxury shopping, it's just an amazing place to go. Very large complex, a very large number of stores. There are also a lot of great restaurants ranging from food court style to burger joints to gourmet restaurants. Uh, so I had some dinner there, and then decided it was time to just head back out to the airport. I wanted to be able to again just walk around a little bit. Though the one thing we can't do at Singapore is check in online in advance. So it means having to, even though it was a very quick trip. I traveled with just a backpack, no luggage. I still had to go through sort of traditional manual check-in at the check-in desk. Uh, the Singapore immigration people also check everybody's passport on exit, so it becomes a bit of a more extended process. Interestingly, though, when you do um, enter what I'll call it traditionally airside at the airport, you do go through immigration, but you do not go through security. They have security arrangements set up at each of the gates. Keeping with the stature and nature of the rest of the airport, the pre-check-in or landside part of the airport is really quite impressive. Uh, Little art boards. There's a number of displays to look at. They had an old school flight status board, so it was really a good way to spend some time waiting for check-in to open up. Once I got through check-in and completed, time to do a bit more walking, stretch some legs, check out some of the shops. There's a lot of interesting little displays and gardens. You can go to butterfly sanctuaries. There's theaters, and all the shopping you could ever want within the terminal. So, whether you're on a layover, spending any time in the airport at all, it is fairly easy to occupy your time. One of my big things on this stop is that I wanted to get cleaned up and have a shower again. So I did go back to the Ambassador Lounge that I showed you in one of the prior clips. Had a shower there, but then went to the SATS Premium Lounge, which is one you can get through Priority Pass, or is the contract lounge that United uses. Had a little bit of a bite to eat there, satisfied what little bit of hunger I had left after dinner, before going back out, walking the terminal for a bit, and heading to my gate. These little garden areas within the Singapore airport are always a highlight and attract a lot of attention and a lot of sightseers, and a nice place to sit while waiting for a flight. As it got close to 10 p.m. Singapore time, it was time to start to head home. Again, 14 hours on the ground to Singapore, and then time to reboard the 787 United Airlines flight from Singapore to San Francisco. It's about another 17-hour flight, so a good chance to get some more sleep after walking around all day and having a really busy day. Sleep came fairly easily, and so again, sleep was broken up by meal service, and watched a couple of movies, middle of the flight snack. I found the service on the long-haul flights to be pretty good. The flight attendants came around with regular water, which was nice. It's good to stay hydrated. But generally, they stayed away between services and weren't really active in the aisles, which made it easy to get some rest and get some sleep, which was great. So after the 17 hours, it was again time to disembark in San Francisco. A long flight, so my first objective was to get up and have a bit more of a walk around the terminal. The terminal that United uses in San Fran is quite nice, reasonably expansive, and clean and neat. One of the interesting things I found, San Francisco, I think, is the only airport that I've ever been to where they have a dedicated yoga room. So if you're traveling and you're going through San Francisco and you need to have a yoga practice, it's a good place to be. I arrived in San Francisco at about roughly 9:30, 10 o'clock local time, and had a midnight flight to Washington Dulles Airport. in the Washington, D.C. area. Being an overnight flight, it was really all just about getting some sleep. So all we've got on here is embarking and disembarking. Not a lot of interest on board. There wasn't anything more than a drink service. I did end up having, and thanks in part to a flight delay, about a 4 or 5 hour layover in Washington. It's a big airport with sort of 4 concourses or terminals, or primary ones. So I spent a bunch of the time walking around, took the walkways between the terminals. They've also got a little sort of train service that goes between terminals, so I tried that out. And then, got a bit hungry and checked out a couple of the lounges. I took the interterminal train over to the international concourses, mainly because I wanted to check that out. I knew that's where the best lounges were. There is a British Airways Galleries lounge that you can use as part of, if you're a Priority Pass member. It was a nice setting. It was up on the second floor looking down towards the terminal concourse, which was nice. It was quiet, but the food offerings were, I guess, I'll say meager. There wasn't anything healthy, there wasn't anything warm, there wasn't anything particularly good or tasty. So this wouldn't be my first choice of the Priority Pass lounges available. If you're in fact flying on British Airways, it looks like for their flights later in the day, particularly if you're a gold card holder, it would have some really good looking stuff, but those areas were roped off for me. So I didn't spend too much time in the Galleries lounge. Decided instead to head over and check out the other option, which was the Turkish Airways lounge. And so it looked out onto the tarmac. You could see a few of the gates, watch some of the activity that was there. It had a nice seating area, had a hot food buffet with a great selection of food and drink, and so it was a much nicer spot to spend some time. Once I left that lounge, I also wanted to take one of the people movers, which are these, almost prehistoric looking beasts that move people between terminals. It runs out into the working parts of the airport to transit people between areas. And so it was a cool way to see some of the airport workings before boarding my flight back to Toronto, which is just about a under 2 hour flight. And then it was back at home about 72 hours after I'd left. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of what it's like to take a mileage run. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you'd stayed through to the end, please give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe to the channel. It's your support that keeps me motivated, keeps me going, and keeps wanting to post these experiences. If you have any questions, or if there's anything you'd ever like me to cover off, please drop a comment into the comment section below. Again, thank you very much for watching A Life's Journeys.